Hello, and welcome back to the Common Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and on today's episode, I get a chance to interview Lenore Skenazy, who has been deemed America's worst mom at one point in her life because she let her 9-year-old son ride the subway alone. In today's episode, we really cover a lot about independence and open-ended play and how that can help kids as they are growing up and developing into adults. She wrote the book Free Range Kids. This is the second edition that came out about 2022. I hope you enjoy our interview. All right, welcome Lenore to the Common Connected podcast.
Hello, I'm happy to be commonly connected.
Well, for people who don't know anything about you, can you just share a little bit about you and your backstory and how you got into what you do?
The backstory, sure. If you Google America's Worst Mom, you find me there for a million Google pages. Although they're not pages anymore now, it's just endless scrolling. Because when our younger son was 9, we let him ride the subway by himself here in New York City. I'm a columnist. I wrote why I let my 9-year-old ride the subway alone. And 2 days later, I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, NPR, until finally I got on Janine's podcast. Took a while because now the 9-year-old's 26. But after getting sort of raked over the coals for letting my son do something unsupervised without a phone, I started a blog and I called it Free Range Kids. And then I wrote the book Free Range Kids. And then I revised the book Free Range Kids. And I was the Free Range Kids lady for about 10 years. And then 6 or 7 years ago, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, and Daniel Schuckman, who was the chairman of FIRE, which fights for free speech on campus, came to me and they said, we're trying to get kids on campus to be less fragile, more open-minded, not need trigger warnings and stuff. We just want them to be excited about meeting different people and hearing different ideas. And that's a late stage intervention to make kids curious and resilient. And we thought we should start younger, and you've run Free Range Kids. Let's start a nonprofit together that's dedicated to childhood independence and sort of raising resilient, resourceful, competent, and I'd say, hopefully happy kids. And I said, okay, but we have to add in one more person, and that's Peter Gray, Gray. You know Peter? Yeah.
I love his work, yes.
Peter's the best. I can't, you'll see throughout this podcast, I'll say, as Peter says, you'll wonder, like, why don't I just interview Peter? Why are we waiting? Like, this is like telephone with Lenore in the middle. But so we brought in Peter Gray to be our 4th co-founder, and our nonprofit is called Let Grow. And it's not called Let It Go. It's not called Let It Grow. It's not called Let's Go. It's Let Grow. The worst phrase ever. Nobody can remember it, but it does sort of signify what we're trying to say, which is when you let go, you let grow. And so Let Grow's mission is to make it easy, normal, and legal to give kids back independence and free play that we sort of accidentally took out of childhood, and just reverse engineer that problem and bring those back and give kids what we think of as it's sort of like natural food, reverse engineered food. Like, oh, we took out all the vitamins and fiber and whatever else it was, a wheat germ, and now we're just putting them back in. Same with childhood. That's our goal.
I think that's incredible. And you know what? If anybody has listened to this podcast for a while, I mention Peter Gray pretty regularly, especially when
I bet I mention him more.
Probably.
Let's see. Let the clicking begin. Oh, she already mentioned it 3 times.
Honestly, there's so many. I just changed my bookshelf, but I think Free to Learn is still up there. And then and I love his work, and it's so interesting because when you read about play, and you're Stuart Brown's work as well, reading all about the importance of play and how it really impacts how we are creative, even as adults. It's a way that we can naturally relieve stress.
Right. Joking around. Yeah.
And it did sort of get taken out, and like to your point, unintentionally. Like it wasn't like people sat around and said, you know what, kids don't need
How can we torment children? And yet we've come up with a lot of ways. We're doing a pretty good job. Right?
Exactly. But I think the work of being able to talk about why play matters, why it's important, why it really does make a difference in growing children who are going to be able to be independent and know what they want outside of somebody else, like that internal locus of motivation. That's really what we want kids to have.
Right.
And there's Ned Johnson, Self-Driven Child. Ned has been on the podcast. I love
Yeah,
his
yeah, he's
work.
great.
I talk all about his work as well.
Right.
So I think it's wonderful that you've created all together, all of you have made this so you're really intervening sooner. You're intervening earlier. That's really,
Right.
as somebody,
And I would say by intervening, what we're doing is not intervening
right.
sooner because there's this whole idea that, when kids are with adults, they're learning more because we're so smart and we're making everything into a teachable moment. My new phrase is for a moment to be teachable, you have to be unreachable. That one hasn't caught on like free range kids, alas. None of my other phrases have. Um, but too bad. Anyways, the point is that because our culture has become wealthier, families are smaller, there's more time and money that we can devote to each child.
Mm,
And in doing so, we think that the more cultivated and sort of perfect an experience is, which is something that adults can do, we can optimize their time and their fun. We think it's more enriching, and that's it may be because it costs more. It costs our time, or we're putting a kid in a class, and there's nothing I have to say against art classes or soccer or whatever, except that they can't crowd out all the free time when kids would be doing stuff on their own. And I can't believe it took me a long time to get this. It's a study that somebody sent me this week that I just wrote about. This paper on adventurous play as a mechanism for reducing risk for childhood anxiety, a conceptual model. Why do people write such boring headlines for amazing information, which is that basically the idea in this paper is that kids, when they're playing, take little risks. They're not crazy, right? They're not, and nobody recommends running into traffic, right? Or, hitchhiking to Omaha. Unless you're Simon and Garfunkel. But anyway, nobody really recommends crazy risks, but children are always doing something that's a little hard. They're climbing the tree a little higher, they're riding their bike a little faster, they're going a little further than they went last time just to see what's around the corner or in the next town. And the thesis of this scholarly paper is that they do that. They're sort of driven to do that biologically because each time that they're a little afraid and their heart rate goes up and they're sweating and they're flushing and they're goosebumps over there, goosebumps there. They are getting used to that bodily response to fear, which is great because the other option, avoidance, and you know this way better than me, but somebody explained it to me and I was so excited. Actually, a professor at UCLA, is that avoidance is when you get like, no, I don't want to go to the birthday party. You have to go to the birthday party. No, I don't want to go to the birthday party. You have to go to the birthday party. Okay, okay, you don't have to go. And so, in the middle of this horrible feeling that's racking your body with spasms of terror, you suddenly get the relief of avoidance. You start going, there's nothing as good as avoidance. Avoidance feels so great. I'm calm, I'm happy, I'm relieved, I'm grateful. And so, the opposite of that is feeling a little afraid and doing something anyway and getting used to the idea that that horrible feeling of fear can be overcome by doing something as opposed to by avoiding it all. And as we all know, avoidance is, you're the therapist or the counselor type person, but the way I was writing it yesterday is that avoidance hardens into anxiety. Is that right?
I could say that. I could see how that would work together, in terms of like how to explain it to somebody. Because if you're constantly avoiding, then that becomes sort of hardwired. Then you
Yeah,
always avoid, and then you're no longer able to go out and go to the birthday party, no matter what, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
got to feel the fear and do it anyway.
yeah,
Like it's
right.
it's
And
how you get through it.
right. And so the thing about play, according to these scholars, is that you're feeling the fear in such a fun situation, which is playing. When I started thinking about it, like so much of play was fearful to me. It's like even tag was like, they're gonna catch me, or oh my God, I gotta find them and I'm slow and they're fast and I'll never have this in an endless game of tag for the rest of my life. I will never find them. So or on the teeter-totter, which of course no place has anymore. but like you were up there and some jerk was at some point going to go, ha ha ha. And it was awful. Why did I go on the teeter-totter at all? It must have been this stupid, this important instinct to like deal with uncertainty. I mean, really what we're talking about is like you don't know what's going to happen next. And being comfortable with that or being able to tolerate that, I'm not sure you ever get comfortable with that, but being able to tolerate that allows you to tolerate life. So I just have to tell you, there was a woman who wrote a book on uncertainty. You might want to have her on your podcast. Actually, she lives in Rhode Island, not too far away. And her name is something. Oh, Maggie Jackson. And it was, you know her already? She also wrote a book about, she's ahead of the curve. She wrote a book 15 years ago called like, I don't know, Technology in the Coming Dark Age or something about warning about phones. And so this other book just came out last summer. And it was about the wisdom and wonder of uncertainty and how if you can't live with uncertainty, it's harder to be, curious or open. And the idea is that now technology is giving us certainty so often and so quickly that we're not learning how to deal with uncertainty anymore. I know exactly what the weather is going to be at 3:15 today. Oh, of course, they're probably wrong, but I think I know exactly what the weather is going to be. So she told us, I went to a lecture by her, and she told the audience about an anxiety intervention in Ohio with high school students, where somehow they had their phones remove caller ID. So the phone rang and you were picking it up, not knowing who was going to be there. And even that was an anxiety intervention because just by putting reverse engineering a little bit of uncertainty back into the kids' lives, they got a little more tolerant of the fact that life isn't certain, which is being able to tolerate, being less anxious and more go with the flow.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that's it. So when you get back to play is all uncertain. Are you going to get caught? Who's going to be next? Are you going to hit it all the way? Am I going to be able to catch the ball? What if I trip? And when you have adults organizing an activity, a lot of the uncertainty is taken out because they're going to tell you what the teams are and who's playing which base and whether the ball was in or out is all determined by an adult. And the adult feels like, oh, good, we got to this faster and there was less squabbling and more playtime, but there was less playtime. There was more baseball time or soccer time, but play is also all the stuff that leads up to the game.
Right.
And that's another thing we took out of kids' lives and thought we made it better and didn't.
Right. It's the negotiation, the learning how to, if you want to keep the play going, sometimes you have to learn how to regulate your own emotions in that moment so that you can continue to play. If you choose not to continue to go on to the play because you are starting to get aggravated with other people, like with other kids, then you stop playing. And that's not what kids want. Kids want to play typically with one another.
Yeah.
So that keeps the play going.
Right.
And especially like inter-age sort of things, that's also sort of gone away.
And who talks about that?
Peter Gray,
I
our good friend.
Right.
Yes, that inter-age sort of like, it's not just all the same age kids. You have the opportunity for kids who are older to be helpful and to feel like leaders, for the little ones to look up to them and get support. And that's really huge for kids to be able to do. I think that's really fun when you get those like different age ranges of kids and people are like, well, how are they going to play together? I'm like, they will, don't worry. Like,
Right.
just let them do it.
Do you think that in the Veld, the prehistoric forebears were saying like the 7-year-olds are with the 7-year-olds over here. Okay, I want the 8 and 9-year-olds here. You're going to be practicing buffalo hunting, right? The 7-year-olds, you're going to be making, saddles, right? That was never it. And when Peter Gray talks about the age mixing thing, he gives great examples, which is that like first of all, parents are always afraid, like, oh my God, won't the 12-year-old bully the 6-year-old? And it's like, more likely you'll see this. The 12-year-old is pitching the ball to the 6-year-old, and there is no glory in striking out a 6-year-old when you're 12, when you're this tall compared to them. And so instead they throw the ball gently and the kid, hits it. And then it's so great when the 12-year-old goes, whoa, it's a home run. Oh, I can't get that ball. Oh, I'm trying to run as fast as I can. And when we've done studies of, I'll just tell you soon about what the Let Grow Play Club is, but when a study was done and they interviewed the older kids, this is K through fifth grade, mixed ages. The older kids were saying things like, I liked it when I taught a game to the little kids, or I liked it when I saw a little kid alone and I would start chasing her and it would be so fun. And what they were saying without realizing it is, I liked the opportunities for empathy and leadership because when do you get that? When it's just 12-year-olds against 12-year-olds, it's who's the fastest, who's the dumbest, right? Who's the best free thrower. So if we don't bring mixed age play back, you're bringing back thin gruel, just the one, and also aren't we against segregation, right? Don't we hate segregation in every other sense? And yet here we are. No seventh grader should be with a fourth grader. That's terrible. So if I can give a plug for Let Grow, has two programs for schools.
Yeah.
One invented by Peter Gray. Haha, now I'm winning in the Peter Gray numerator. And what it is it's just keep the schools open for before or after school or both, mixed age, no devices, free play. We keep coming up with different words for it. It's like I want to call it a social club because there's people like me who aren't really loving to play. I would never play kickball voluntarily. But the girls or whoever it is like me can be drawing with chalk or can be trading cards or can be pulling out pieces of grass because we're bored, but we're talking to each other and that's fun. And when we've seen Let Grow play clubs at schools, we've seen discipline problems go down. We've seen attendance go up. We need more actual studies. So if any of your listeners are teachers or counselors or administrators at schools, we would love you to try a play club and let us know. And the only thing is that the parents have to sign a little waiver before their kid joins play club, which is I realize my child will not be happy every single second of play club. so that they're recognizing that this is not a curated perfect experience. It's not Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. It's like 90% of what you would be getting as a kid if you went with your friends from the neighborhood to the local park and we're just playing or we're playing on the street. So a play club, all our materials are free for a Let Grow play club, but they're pretty obvious. It's like, kids can figure things out, put out some balls. I think if you put out cardboard boxes, you might never get them back into the school because the kids will be so happy. And then we have one other program that we recommend for schools, also free, even easier than the play club, which is the Let Grow experience. And you can just go to our website and request it, and it's free. You talk to our schools person for like 15 minutes, and then you get it. And what it is a homework assignment that teachers give students that says, let's go back to a generic sheet of paper for our purposes here, that says, go home and do something new on your own with your parents' permission, but without your parents. And yes, it's an assignment for the kid, but it's also an assignment for the parent who has to talk to their kid about like, well, I know you haven't walked to school yet, or I know you've never, gone to the store, but if that's what you really want to do, and then they negotiate depending on the kid, the neighborhood, the age, the parents' tolerance of anxiety on their own right. And then the kid goes and does it. And the reason this is such a significant project, even though it's so basic, is that when the kid comes back, and they went to the store and they got the bread and they're so proud, or they went to the store and they couldn't find the bread, or they got the wrong change, or they forgot to pay and now the police are after them. Whatever it is, whether it happened perfectly or imperfectly, and in some ways it's better if it was imperfect, they now realize that they can do it. They realize that their parents trust them, and the parent is so proud that it's almost crazy. I mean, the parents are usually like, look at what they did. Last night I was on a webinar and I asked parents to tell me what a time they were most proud of their kids. Actually, I'll ask you. Tell me a time you were most proud of your kids or kid.
Actually, you know what? When my daughter has actually baked muffins or cookies, whenever she bakes something, she finds the recipe herself. She gets all of the ingredients that are in our house. So she finds a recipe that requires stuff that we only have here, right? So she's figuring that out, makes them, and then cleans up everything afterwards. It is incredible. She will do this every time we actually go to soccer with my son. We will come home to fresh baked cookies or muffins and a clean kitchen. And as a mom, I'm about that. It makes me super proud because she's so good at it and she was able to do it independently. She's just like, you know what, I'm a little bored. I'd like a little sweet treat. Let me get this together. Let me be able to go and make all the stuff, figure out what I really enjoy, figure out how I can make it, like problem solving when a cookie doesn't rise properly. And so she's figured it out. It's really cool. And I never expect it, but I'm always thrilled when I come home to a warm oatmeal cookie or a warm chocolate chip cookie that's in a clean kitchen.
That's, you've summed up exactly what I'm talking about. The greatest joy for us as parents is when our kids do something on their own,
Yeah.
things that we weren't sure that they were quite capable of yet, things that seem more mature than anything else they do when they're around us, right? I mean, there is something about independence that's heady for the kid. They don't want to leave you with this horrible, messy kitchen because that's babyish, right?
Right.
That's immature. They're showing you, look, this is who I am. And to be seen as that, as opposed to a bumbling, adorable baby, is
Right.
really important for kids. And when we are always doing stuff with our kids, they see that we love them, but they don't see that we trust them.
Yeah.
And we don't see how much they can do. I'm imagining if you're with them, it's like, honey, don't forget, that's gonna get, you want to put the water in it now so it doesn't get hard to wash, or here's a spatula, don't forget. And so throughout history, parents have never spent as much time right now as we are spending, or so it seems. There's these studies that show how much time moms, especially college educated moms, spent in the 70s till the 90s. And then, it's exploded since then. And I think of it as sort of an assault on feminism, this idea that we're supposed to be with kids all the time. It's like, oh, so we're not supposed to do anything else?
Right.
Nothing? Is that it? Or that sort of seems a little backwards.
Yep.
And then it's driving us crazy. It's driving the kids crazy because so last night's webinar was with a lot of educators. And I
Mm.
said I'd heard this from several teachers, and it struck me originally as an urban myth or something that people were exaggerating. But I said that I'd heard from a lot of teachers that when a kid drops a pencil or a magic marker in class, it rolls off their desk, they look at it. And then the teachers on this webinar were saying, yes, that's what happens. I mean, we've sort of drained so much agency out of kids that the act of going like this, which I will demonstrate here, didn't take a ton of energy or forethought or strength. I got this back. That doesn't happen. So it's like, well, aren't we seeing that there's something very strange happening to kids in America, that we're worried about the anxiety and the depression? I think that we also have to add passivity to it. And the passivity strikes me as the best analogy is because oh, there goes my light. Even my light is growing passive. And I have to do so much to turn it back on. But the analogy for me is the passenger seat versus the driver's seat. The driver pays attention, puts the pedal to the metal, stops, looks at landmarks, etc. And the passenger, which is usually me since I barely drive, is like, and it's like, how did we get there? People say to me, like, you take 208 to the Palisades. I'm like, and I nod along because I don't want to look like a mom. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, 208, that must be that highway that's past the gas station. I don't know where I am because I am in the passenger seat of actual driving. But you don't want kids to be in the passenger seat of their lives. But sometimes they are literally in the passenger seat because we're driving them to so many activities. And then they're in the passenger seat when the adults are running the activity, right? So all I'm saying is they can't be in the passenger seat their whole life between school and after school and homework and assistance from us because we're worried about them falling behind, and because we're so told we have to be with them all the time and told we have to supervise them all the time. It's like, not only do you not have to do that, it's better for you and better for them if they have some time apart. So the Let Grow experience, people are like maniacs about it once they do it because they're so excited to have this new way of life, which is they can do things on their own. They can make the muffins. They can walk to the store. They can, they can go to their friend's house, and I have free time and they have agency, and it's such a win-win.
Absolutely. And that's why I think Ned Johnson's work, and I've linked to his the
Mhm.
podcast episode we did, because he talks so much about that self-driven motivation, parent as consultant model, where you're really taking your foot off of the gas and putting them in charge. Because the whole point is we want to raise independent people who are going to go out into the world. Like, we cannot continue to smooth the way for them. It's okay for there to be bumps. It's okay for things to not go well.
Mhm.
And that's what I actually really, in your book, I just finished reading it, Free
Okay.
Range Kids. This is the second edition. I love the examples of the Let Grow program and how kids were able to do these cool things, and things didn't always go well. Like the little
Right.
boy like got on the wrong bus, and then
Yes.
he solved the problem. He asked the bus driver, and he felt so good after he was like, "Oh, okay, it's super scary to get on the wrong bus." And then I figured out what I need to do. I found a safe adult. I was able to get on the right area. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go get my little sister. Here we
Right.
go.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad you remember that story. Yeah, that's from a long time ago. And he kept the little piece, the little bus transfer with him in his wallet because it's his proof that he can be out in the world and even screw up. I mean, the word I hear the most, I guess it's two words from kids, is they're afraid they're going to mess up. Do you hear that a lot?
Yes, and that's why there's this whole perfectionist thing that I will see
Yeah.
a lot with my clients, where I'm like, you're gonna make a mistake. Please, let's make a mistake. Actually, there was I my kids were both in band at one point, and there
Hmm.
was this great piece that they did a couple years ago in middle school. And I can't remember the name of the piece, but what happens is they played it through one time with no mistakes, allegedly. And then the next time they were supposed to play it through, and everybody was supposed to make one mistake. And it was so much fun to sit and listen. And
Wow.
the looks on their faces, they were like, I'm making a mistake now. And it was like, it's expected. That's part of the piece. Like, you are going to play a wrong note. Please play a wrong note, because that's part of the excitement and the entertainment and the piece of it. It was just so cool. It was really fun.
First of all, I think that's a very cool idea. It's lovely. I mean, if you had a videotape of it, I would love to watch it and giggle. Um, but of course, I'm also against everybody videotaping everything with their kids.
I actually didn't tape it, but
Okay. I once did a piece a long time ago, like why are we video like at this camp that my kids were at? We're all invited for banner day, which was just like 10 days into camp, and they'd all made banners. You can imagine they were not Picasso there. And all the parents are videotaping, and I'm like, I bet nobody ever watches this again. It's embarrassing, it's boring, right? The artwork is non-existent, it's just blotches. But we do feel compelled to videotape. Anyways, what I was going to say about the goof up thing and the fact that it was more interesting to the audience when it wasn't perfect
yes.
is another analogy I use is like if you go on a trip and you're staying at a five-star hotel, and I hope you do someday, and you ask the concierge, where should I go for dinner? And they say, oh, madame, you should go to this place, and I will, or, get you a cab. And you get in the cab, and the cab takes you to the place, and it deposits you there, and you eat what the concierge recommended, and it is scrumptious. And then a cab takes you back, and it's like you've had a good meal. But if you wander out and you're like me and you're terrible with maps and you end up like in the alley where it's like goat head alley, and you go and I wonder what they serve here. And then you're looking down and the eyeballs looking back up and you're like, okay, and you eat it, and then a band comes out because you're the first American who's ever eaten a goat head, and the waitresses are playing with your kids, and you leave there, and you get your watch stolen, and on the other hand, you hear a troubadour, and then you find the amazing fountain that only lights up at 11:27 p.m., and then you're back. Then you've had this amazing experience, good, bad, meeting real people, having a meal that you didn't expect. And why do we think it's better for kids to have the concierge life? What is fun about life other than, the surprises and the figuring somebody wants, I mean, everything I learned is from other people. I guess that's obvious, but that like solving problems is actually a joy,
Yes.
right? And so we keep solving our kids' problems, and it's like we wonder why, huh? There's the pen. What would I do? What would make that pen come up to me? So let grows, I guess programs and philosophy are just there to make it easier for parents to step back. You're doing it, you're doing it because the school says so. You're not the only one doing it. A whole class is doing it. You're comparing notes, and you're not the guilty, crazy person who said, "Oh, I bet my kid can walk to school," or "I bet my kid can bake when I'm not there." So that's it. I just, I come on podcasts in part to like promote the idea, like come to the Let Grow website because our stuff is free and it works and it's easy and it's liberating.
Yes. And so it's letgrow.org,
It
correct?
is. Yes, it is.
Okay. So, and you have resources for families, you have resources for schools, and you have resources for therapists.
Yeah, and it's all free. Yes. So there's a professor of psychology, Camilo Ortiz at Long Island University, who was, reading Let Grow's materials and thought, we have a million examples and happy stories, but do we have any data that this is really great? And he said, I wonder if this could be a pilot study, like using independence as therapy for kids with a diagnosis of anxiety. So
Yeah.
everything in your field takes forever. But
Yes.
he did finally recruit 4 families and did the whole IRB thing and was working with a PhD candidate named Matt Fastman. And they devised an experiment where they would take 4 families where the kids had a diagnosis of anxiety. And by that, I mean, you're in this field. I didn't know. I mean, I feel like I'm an anxious person, but I didn't realize that anxiety could be so bad. Like the kids were shaking,
Yeah.
or had headaches or were like nauseous with fear for sort of everyday things, which struck me as just sad and terrible.
Yep.
So they found 4 of these families, and the kids were between ages 9 and 13 or 14. And the experiment was a 5-week protocol where the first week, Camillo, the therapist, met just with the parents, and he found out like what's going on, what brings you here. And like one family, and I'm just going to talk about this one family, had a kid, a boy, 10 years old, afraid to go upstairs and downstairs in his own house without his mom or dad, which is something that when I'd first heard about somebody else telling me this, I thought like this is another exaggeration or a weird story, just like the pen on the floor. And you're looking like it's common,
Yeah. It's more
right?
common than you'd think.
It's way
Like,
more common than I thought. I've heard about it several times. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so that was their big worry, and Camilla talks to them about the importance of independence and what it's going to be, which is we're going to try to make your son more independent, and that might help. So then the next week, the parents come with the kid, and normally in cognitive behavioral therapy, I feel like an idiot telling you this, but um, he would say to the kid, "Oh, I hear you're afraid of walking upstairs and downstairs. How about tonight? You go upstairs to your own room and you wait there for 5 minutes, and here's a watch, and you can, measure it, and then you can come back down and we'll talk about how difficult it was." Nothing like that occurs in independence therapy. No mention of like, "I hear you're a scaredy cat," and I mean, I guess a nice therapist wouldn't put it that way anyway. But anyways, there's no mention of the inciting incident, and instead it's like you're 10. Jerry, what do you think you're ready to do? What kind of new things would you like to do that your parents haven't said yes to yet? So there's a little conspiratorial, alliance. And then it turns out that even these extremely anxious kids wanted to do certain things. Like this kid wanted to walk home from school by himself. He wanted to take the Long Island Railroad, and I don't know what else. And the other kids, like a girl who was afraid to sleep in her own bed, who was 9, wanted to sell bracelets at school. Somebody wanted to go to the park and play chess with the guys who are so smart that they can beat everybody at chess and yet can't get a job. Uh, the kids' goal or the kids' assignment was to do one independence activity either every day or every other day for 4 weeks. And at the end of those 4 weeks, Camillo measured he doesn't call it anxiety levels. He asked the kids, how often are you worried? And all the kids went from being worried most of the time to being worried a little bit of the time. And the kid who was afraid to go up and downstairs in his own house, that was the summer before 6th grade, which is middle school. And the middle school, because this is the era that just overdoes everything and sort of makes us more anxious than we have to be by pretending that everything is a big deal, sends a letter home to the parent, your child is going to be starting middle school and they have to find their own locker and there's going to be a homeroom teacher and new kids. And of course, they might want you to come along, feel free. like Columbus, off to find, the East Indias. So the kid told his parents, actually, I got this.
Good for
And
him.
he did. This is like such a nice proof of concept story. So he went to school by himself the first day, gets the locker amazingly and learns the combination or whatever. And when he came home, he told his parents, it turned out I was one of the few kids who didn't have a parent with me. So all I'm saying is independence it's not radical and it's ancient. And same with play. And we took them out of kids' lives accidentally. Let Grow is trying to put them back in the easiest, not only in the easiest way possible, but also free, but also collectively.
Right.
Because if you do it, like if everybody at school it can go to play club and everyone at school gets the Let Grow experience, it just renormalizes the important parts of childhood that our culture accidentally took out.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited that you were able to come on the podcast and share all of this information. I think Let Grow sounds like a wonderful program. So if schools are interested, if therapists are interested, if families are interested, they should visit letgrow.org and get the free resources. And as always, I always like to ask my guests one last question. What are your coping skills? How do you rest and recharge, Lenore?
I think I do exactly what your daughter does. I do a lot of baking. And actually, this is TMI, where we spend our summer, there's so many mice that you can't even use the oven. Let's just put it that way. Ugh. So I haven't been able to bake. I'm in my second home and I haven't been able to bake. How sad. But I'm really looking forward to baking again when I get back to the city because that is my thing. Baking and of course eating the dough.
Yes, of course. And you know what? My daughter would say the same thing. She loves to eat the dough. She loves to bake. She loves to find new recipes. And so I think baking is such a great
Yeah.
strategy that sometimes I think people overlook. Like there's something very mindful about baking. Like you actually have to really pay attention and be kind of like there to like make sure you put the right stuff in, you know?
Right. Don't substitute the salt for the sugar.
Right, exactly. And so I think
Yeah.
baking is great. Plus you get like all the results from it so you can eat it. Like
Right,
it's
and you can share it. Yeah.
and
I
you
mean,
can
I live
share.
in a small apartment building and people get a lot of cookies from me because that allows me to bake again.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And
Yes.
if people want to learn more about you, they should go to letgrow.org. And as always, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you liked it, please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget about yourself. Take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.